What's up, everybody, and welcome to this special live pod. Syracuse Sports, it's Brent X, it's Chris Carlson. They're back. We've got news, and it's positive news for Syracuse basketball. They have seen 4 players enter the transfer portal in recent days since it officially opened earlier this week, but 2 names that will not be going into the portal and will be returning to Syracuse are JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman. And those were the 2 you had to get back. Your 2 leading scorers from last year, and even with all the time that Donnie Freeman missed, still the 2nd leading rebounder on this team as well. So huge news for Syracuse basketball, who is still certainly looking for players in the portal, which, as we mentioned, opened earlier this week and still has a lot of slots to fill with losing 4 players that left naturally due to graduation and being out of eligibility, and just the free agency period we find ourselves here in college sports. So we're going to react to that. We're going to get some reaction from our Syracuse Sports Insiders as well. You can see it there on your screen, but if you're watching or listening later, you can find all the info in the show notes on how to become a Syracuse Sports Insider to get direct text message access to us for your Syracuse sports thoughts, questions, analysis, our spring football pods and analysis continuing on the text line, and so much more here at a busy time of the year. So, Chris, I turn to you as we got the news in a pair that JJ and Donnie are deciding to come together. It's interesting. On Friday, they appeared together in uniform at an NIL event, which was at Turning Stone. For those of you not familiar, Turning Stone is a casino which is in between Syracuse and Utica. It's about a half hour or so outside of Syracuse. And that was my first thought that, okay, maybe these are the 2 going forward. I just took a good vibe from that, okay, they're doing the work here to ensure that those are the 2 that come back. And lo and behold, today it's affirmed that those are the 2 coming back.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's the 2 most dynamic sort of players from the team. It's the 2 players that certainly would have commanded the most money on the open market, which, like, we're all a little curious about where Syracuse is financially after sort of the stories that we reported at the end of the regular season. Good signs there. Good signs that they're in a much healthier place, that they were able to bring those 2 back. And you can, what skill sets you sort of have, so that now you can figure out exactly what sort of role players you need to bring in around them to make them better. Because I don't know that Syracuse, I still think Syracuse is going to have to be like a well-designed, sort of thought-out roster versus just like an all-star team, right? They're gonna have to put together a team that sort of fits together, so you can start figuring who fits around JJ, who fits around Donnie.
Those are the 2 you couldn't lose, and I think we'll get into the basketball aspect of this in a minute, Chris. But you know what? Autry needed a win. When Syracuse fans went to the buffet down the stretch, and for a lot of the season, but there was just so much bad news, right? It was their 2nd losing season in 4 years. They're missing the tournament for the 4th straight season. Just all these stats and these numbers and these trends that were not pointing to anything good. Attendance, one of the lowest in the history of the Dome. After that last loss in the ACC tournament, Autry didn't want to send a message to the fans when asked directly about that. He was, as he put it in his words, disappointed with the coverage, right? It just, of the team, it just felt like, man, can we get some sort of win? And you go into portal season with a lot of trepidation, knowing you're going to lose some guys. And then on Sunday, the names start flowing, right? Elijah Moore, Kyle Cuff, Chris Bell, the legend of Chance Westry. He goes into the portal, right? And you're just taking these deep breaths thinking, man, as some insiders were saying to me, Chris, if you can get either JJ or Donnie back, it's a win. But to have them announce together that they're coming back, it's not only a win in that aspect, it's a win for Autry, Chris, because JJ and Autry have had a long-standing relationship, even when JJ initially went to Notre Dame first and then transferred to Syracuse. It was one of the main reasons that he did in coming home was his relationship with Autry. And Donnie Freeman is his highest-rated recruit to this point. So it shows that you can bring them back, and I think you hit on it too. It shows that they do have the resources, NIL-wise, to bring players back that they really need. And look, frankly, I don't think there's anywhere else JJ could go to get the kind of NIL opportunities that are here in Syracuse, especially car commercials and being a face. Homegrown, exactly, right? You can get NIL money, but the other stuff that comes from NIL, the traditional NIL, the commercial opportunities and things of that nature, where else are you going to go than Syracuse, where you're going to really cash in there? Donnie falls more, not that he won't get some of those commercials and did have those this prior season, but Donnie could have gotten a lot more money elsewhere if he really wanted to push the envelope and essentially pull a Malik Brown, right? So
yeah, he could have gone to the highest bidder and
for sure,
right, and gone to a program that has won more recently than Syracuse has. I mean, that would have been a reasonable thing for him to do.
An educated guess on that, by the way, based on market value, based on a few initial things that I've heard. This is a loose number here, but people are wondering, well, how much is it costing to bring a guy like Donnie Freeman back? And my educated guess on that, I'm not reporting this, I'm just kind of throwing it at you here just based on what I've seen from other players, where he fits and what it would take to get a player like that back. Think somewhere in the $1.5 million range, right? So that's a big investment for Syracuse. They still have a number of players in the portal they have to go get and frankly have to outbid other teams for at critical positions, point guard and center being the ones.
And shooting. Like they need shooting.
And they need shooting.
Like if you're going to build around JJ, like you have to have your shooting sort of from somewhere else.
Which makes me wonder about a player they are bringing in and his shooting prowess, who we'll talk about here shortly. But these are good signs. It's a win for Syracuse as a program. It's a win for the fan base. They can breathe a little sigh of relief that they have some pieces to build around. And it's a win for Adrian Autry here. So now we'll see if it's a win for the team in general, because Alex Klein still has a lot of work to do in the transfer portal, and the portal is open. It's interest season, Chris, as I like to put it. You see the names from Joe Tipton and some of the guys out there like, oh, well, the following schools have shown interest in these players, and you're looking on that list like, is Syracuse on there? And there's been a couple guys so far, and that's only going to grow here as the days progress here in the portal, and we all wonder if that list gets shorter and Syracuse is on it with a number of key guys at those positions and the shooting prowess that they need.
And right, of the names that I've seen just sort of batted around, like I've looked up stats and like they are going after mostly shooters, right? Like they're centers and shooters. So Syracuse certainly knows that if it's going to have a core of JJ, Donnie Freeman, who can space the floor but like isn't going to put up a ton of threes, probably. Like he's sort of a keep you honest shooter, and then Sadiq White is not really a shooter at this point. Like, that is something they are going to have to bring in the portal. I know we poo-pooed it a little bit towards the end of the year when Adrian Autry said, like, it could be worse, because nobody wants to hear it, right? Nobody wants to hear it at that point in the season. The old moral victory, like, the team didn't fall apart. Give him a little credit for it, right? Like the team didn't fall apart, and that allowed him to bring these guys back. These guys did not bail on him. He did not lose these guys. So, I know it is one rung above rock bottom is moral victory land, but he is right. It could have been worse, and they could have been rock bottom instead of moral victory land.
It would have been devastating if you lost both of these guys. If you lose one, it's kind of that meet in the middle, expected, but still you're going down the ladder a couple more rungs there. To get both of these two back, the two most important on the list, when we did our pod last week saying, okay, who we think will be back and who won't, I mean, these are the two that it just centered around. I think the other guys, I want to be judicious in how I say this here, but from a basketball standpoint, they were expendable. They look, you trade Elijah Moore for Kiyan Anthony. Chris Bell certainly had its limits as a player, and I think is somebody you can replace if in some categories you can upgrade on.
You should get back. Yes, you need. I was having this conversation earlier. Like, you need a 3 and D player or a 3 and rebound player.
Yes.
Not or a 3 and can move the ball player. Not just a can sit in the corner and make a 3 player, which is sort of what Chris Bell was for them. You need at least a 2-dimensional guy.
That's a great point. The and just wasn't there. Chris Bell was a 3-point shooter, and that was pretty much it. You saw flashes and at times other
he
parts
could block
of his
a
game.
Shot here and there, but
not enough. It just wasn't consistent enough. He'd go stand in a spot in the corner, and his three-point shooting improved as the season went along. I think I saw a stat from Mike Waters here that he didn't qualify enough shots to put it up there, but statistically, in some ways, he was like the best three-point shooter in the ACC.
Once conference play started, he was substantially better.
But you can go find that, right? Yep. Kyle Cuff Jr., I think I love the attitude he played with. He was a great free throw shooter. As we know, free throws matter. He would take it into the paint a little too often, challenging players that were 4, 5, 6 inches taller than him, and it just became kind of like Groundhog Day that he would get blocked 2 or 3 times a game, especially in the last 10 games or so, because, again, you got to admire the spirit he played with. It just wasn't very smart at times for him to drive that paint and take on these defenders when he couldn't get to the rim as often as he wanted to. Brought some leadership to that locker room, which they'll have to replace. Chris, you were in the locker room this year. I was in the locker room this year and often would hear from the younger players some wisdom that Kyle Cuff did dispel on them, right? So you do have to replace that, but that's what JJ is for. He's the clear leader of this team next year. And we never saw enough of Chance Westry, unfortunately, to really have an opinion about what kind of impact he could have made at Syracuse. He just had a string of injuries and illness this year, and he was around the team, but just we never saw him play this season. So I don't have enough of an opinion to know the impact he would make, right? But we know this, Chris. So now you're looking at the lineup, and it's JJ, and we can argue what the most important position Syracuse needs is. Point guard 1, center 1A, center 1, point guard 1A, wherever you fall in that category. But you need a point guard, and you need – and this is where I think it gets interesting. There are so many more players in the portal now, Chris, that have 2 or 3 years of eligibility left. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to go get a senior, but it would help to have somebody who's been around the block a few times, that's been in a tough conference, that's played at a high level for a year or two to pair with JJ in the backcourt. And then you're looking at Kiyan Anthony and Luke Fennell. Fennell, the Australian import, is intriguing to me, Chris. He's 6'6". He can shoot the ball. He can play both positions. Mm-hmm. He's somebody we're going to learn a lot more about in the coming weeks as these guys start to arrive on campus and do workouts. And I'm sure some of you guys out there and gals have watched film and kind of have a sense of who he is. He played a pro ball, essentially, in Australia. So could be a hidden gem. Could be part of that shooting that they're looking for here, right? Freeman and White is the intriguing thing to me. And I saw you tweet about this a little bit, Chris. So I want to toss it to you just to discuss this a little bit. That was one of the things people wondered about. Sadiq White and Donnie Freeman play the same position. My take on
sort
that
of,
was
right? Probably,
in
ideally, both power forwards.
Correct.
In an ideal world.
In a vacuum, that's where you want them. But my take on that was always figure it out, right? If you have 2 players like that, so are we going to see Freeman play a little at the 5, which eliminates the need to go get 2 centers. I still think it's a pretty good idea if you can get 2 centers to do that. But
or you get 2, but like one is sort of your emergency center, right. like Naheem, right. Like I'm gonna your 5 fouls type of center, right?
Yes.
Versus like a guy that can actually give you a lot of minutes.
Sadiq's a great shot blocker. He likes to play, and they need defense too.
That is like the biggest area that they need to improve, and just his presence, that is what he's known for more than anything else. His presence will help on defense.
I don't think Peter Mastorovich has to make an official proclamation that he's returning. I think we're all never assume anything in the portal era, but I think we're all
Kyle, yeah, I mean, he and Kyle Cuff were the 2 guys outside of Donnie and JJ, and I mean, Kyle was just mostly because he said he was coming back, so we took him at his word. But yeah, Patar is like the other guy that I think we think is probably, going to be back as an end of the rotation type of guy.
I'm pretty confident the Maestro will be back out there. And then there's 2 more transfers, essentially, that fit into the rotation there that you have to find, and you prioritize the positions. But you said it. You got to prioritize shooters. You got to prioritize defense for this team. The feeling that comes from this, from fans, was, our Syracuse Sports Insiders were thrilled that both of them came back. And don't just take my word for it. Let's hear from them a little bit here, Chris. Bill M. says, positive news with 8 scholarships now available and the need for a point guard, 2 centers. What are the expectations that they use all 8 with playing time available and, air quotes, competitive NIL money? Mike Waters has said this a lot, Chris. Just because you have X amount of scholarships available doesn't mean you have to fill all of them. Mm-hmm. But This team lost a number of players, so if they can and can be competitive, I think you should. And Bill, I think they'll come close to that. Maybe not all 8 positions, but they still have some holes to fill. I mean, as it stands right now, my guy Noah Lobdell could be out there playing for this team. So they certainly have some bodies to line up on that bench.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I mean, I do think that, right, you want difference makers, so you want to pay the guys that really deserve to be paid. And then, at the end of that spot, if you can find a guy who's going to come play for free or for a scholarship or for minimal NIL money, yeah, you bring him in. But, like, if you don't fill every spot, like, I think you're okay in this world. I mean, Calipari, right? Like, I mean, I forget how many, but, like, he was criticized substantially at the start of the year because he went with a really, really small group of guys.
Yeah.
It's like, he's just like, that's, like, I don't need more than this. Well, he didn't have the best season in the world, but he's in the Sweet 16. So no complaints, probably.
R.I.P. Gene Hackman. My team's on the floor, right? Sometimes that's all you need out there. And I don't want to throw a lot of names out there because we're early in portal season, but there are some that go through a couple of filters and at the very least make you say, huh. And one of those is somebody that Donna Dakota tweeted about today, Chris. That's Wichita State center Quincy Ballard. 6'11". He averaged 10 points, just over 9 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game last year. He shoots 75% from the field, and Syracuse native, Quincy Ballard. So can you tug on the heartstrings a little bit there? The JJ Starling plan, that's a guy that I don't know if they're going to show interest in. You would imagine they should absolutely at least take the temperature on that if he's interested in coming home, and that could be a target for Syracuse at that position. Speaking of the center, Richard B. jumps in to say, looking forward to Freeman and White playing either 3 and 4 or 4 and 5 on the court, as we were just talking about a bit. Maybe a true 5 shows up in the portal. Donnie coming back is a vote of confidence for Autry. Gene kind of...
I will say, we did see, right, Donna wrote last year, I think, like centers are sort of the rarest species that exist in the transfer portal, sort of the true center. So you are paying a premium for centers. So the idea that you are going to bring in maybe 2 of those guys, at least at a high level, seems unlikely to me. I think you want one, but like I do think we're going to see Donnie play some at the 5, just like he would have this year. At minimum in sort of a backup role. Like that's how I think I would structure my roster.
As Gene notes here, whoever the best center in the portal is, throw the bank at him and let's make a run. And that's a short list of guys. And look, Eddie Lampkin was one of the higher rated centers in the portal last year. They got in early on Eddie. And remember, so they locked him down, but then there was a little renegotiation that took place over the summer. He kind of went dark for a while. He erased his social media. There was a lot of anxiety for a while. It all worked out in the end. And Eddie Lampkin was the example of a center you can bring out of the portal who came in, and once he overcame his back issues...
Yeah, he was good. He was good. He was good once he got past the back issues. Yep.
He was exactly what you needed, a productive center. Now, look, defensively, he had his lags, and Eddie's not a guy that can get off the floor as much, but, man, he was the heart and soul of that team for a good part of the season. Great guy in the locker room, big part of the community. He's out there at community events. He's an entrepreneur. He's got a restaurant in town, and just I think you got a lot of different aspects out of Eddie Lampkin, but everybody that's talking about the center is right. And so that's where I guess it takes the 1 over the 1A at point guard, because it's just the harder position to find because the quality guys start dropping off the list a lot faster. Rich P says, that's the best news I've heard in a long time with JJ and Donnie coming back. Hopefully they can lock down a center and a point guard in the portal. Adrian Autry should have the pieces to the puzzle. Can he put it together better this year is the question. Cody asks, did Donnie get to redshirt? And is it possible we try to play very athletic and have Donnie play some 5, that we really only need to focus on one center in the portal, as we were just talking about there, Cody? And Donnie did miss the redshirt threshold. He was over the threshold. He played too many games.
He's not playing 4 years of college basketball.
And he wouldn't want a red shirt either. Exactly. Right. So, we live in a world where you could push the NCAA a little harder these days and be like, why don't you give that guy a red shirt? But he's not going to want it one way or the other. Jack says, fantastic news to hear these guys are coming back. Let's give Red some credit for keeping them in the fold. Now let's get some help from the portal. Buddy P says, absolutely the 2 guys you wanted back. It'll be interesting to see how the roster starts to shape up as the portal frenzy continues. Honestly, though, if you were to tell me 2 weeks ago it would be a pretty serious roster shakeup, but JJ and Donnie were staying, I would be on board for that. I think everybody would be on board for that. If I flew back in my flying DeLorean and Doc Brown and I got out and said, here's the deal, complete roster shakeup, but these 2 are back, I think everybody takes that deal at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the only other guy, like we talked about Elijah and maybe keeping him just because he's young and promising, but like we knew that would be difficult with Kiyan coming in. And these were the 2 guys who were at the top of the list. And everybody else, in the world of sports, everybody else was expendable.
Dave, in college basketball free agency, that's how it goes these days. Dave J makes a good point here, Chris, when he says it's great news getting JJ and Donnie back, and it makes searching for a good point guard and center more doable. That's a great point, because now Autry and Alex Klein can go out there and say, here's who's back, here's who you're building around, who's you're playing off of, as opposed to, you could sell playing time, right? But you're selling an empty roster, and it's like, well, who am I playing with? What's the deal? Now you have a much better sense of, you've got a veteran guard who's been around, who's the leader of the team, who you can work off of, and an NBA caliber talent, along with 2 top 50 recruits coming in. That's a much better foundation to build off of had JJ and Donnie left.
Top 10 scorer and 2 NBA prospects, and Sadiq and Donnie, right? I mean, I'm sure maybe I'm shorting Kiyan, but at least 2.
You will take that for sure. So here we are, just day 2 of the portal open, Chris, and Syracuse has a much better sense of what its roster is going to look like and how it can fill those holes than when the portal opened a couple days ago. And once those names start going in, and it's just this yearly exercise of, it's a mix of fascination and frustration for me. I'm fascinated by how it happens, and it's like building a fantasy roster every year, but the frustration of just, this is where we're at, and air quotes, college athletics, and gives us a lot to write about and talk about, certainly, and cover. And the fascination and the frustration play tug of war in my mind here. But hey, this is where we're at, and we'll keep tracking it and keep following it. And now they can fully focus on the inbox, right? The outbox they know is complete. Now let's see who's coming in and who wants to play for Syracuse and who wants to make some money at Syracuse and who wants to help bring a storied program. They threw up a graphic the other day, Chris, all-time NCAA tournament wins, and there Syracuse was. And I'm like, man, like, they still can put that out there, right? As much as a lot of the numbers don't look good right now and are not up to the orange standard, to use that term, there's still enough of a history and a residence there that you can still sell that Syracuse brand, and you can sell playing time, and we think maybe make a little money as well.
I thought Rick Pitino said one of the more interesting things about building a roster these days, and where he compared it to European basketball. Those guys are all on 1 year, and if you're great, you're on a 2-year deal, and that's it. That's all the longevity anybody gets. Everybody in Europe is on a 1 or a 2-year contract. So building a college roster is just like European professional basketball at this point. And, it's imperfect. I look forward to when they collectively bargain some sort of, rules and guys are signing longer term deals. But it's far better now when players are getting paid than it was previously when they were not.
So, Chris, before we go, I just wanted to get your thoughts on something broader here with the tournament going on, and hopefully a tournament that Syracuse is back in next year. But you look at the Sweet 16, and Cinderella's nowhere to be found. Yeah. It's all Big Ten, SEC, Duke, right? All the Power Fours. There's nobody in there. There's no McNeese State, Colorado State almost got there. Maryland beat them on a buzzer beater, but this is as chalky as it gets, right? And I'm thinking to myself, a lot of people are looking at this and don't like this. It's NIL in action. It's the best Sweet 16 money can buy. And then I saw this today, and trust me, ratings are not the be-all, end-all, but this was still pretty interesting today. TNT and CBS delivered the NCAA tournament's best viewership since 1993, averaging 9.4 million viewers through the second round. Now, again, you have CBS, TNT, True TV, TBS. You have streaming. You can, add up some things that did not exist in 1993.
Sports betting helps.
Sports betting is a huge part of it. The tournament is always big for that. But they had the highest viewership since 93. We love upsets and some of these stories we're talking about, but you know what people like more than that? Teams that they know and players that they know and brand names, right? That they will follow deeper into the tournament. First couple rounds is all about Cinderella, but once the cream rises to the top, I just found that number interesting for all the hand-wringing out there about what's wrong with college basketball. Well, people are watching, and as you said, they're betting on it here, so everybody's taking that to the bank.
Yeah, I mean, right, the ideal NCAA tournament for a lot of people is a couple upsets in the first and second round, maybe one, so maybe some Cinderella sneaks into the Sweet 16, and then like brands from there on out competing for the national title, right? Like that's like the TV executive's dream tournament. That's how it goes. I know that there's the possibility that, right, I saw people talking today that NIL has killed Cinderella and we're not going to have those runs anymore. Last year, the narrative was like NIL caused parity. And it was the most parody ever. So I don't think we know yet, right? Like it could be either one of those things, but I think there's not enough data to know exactly what the long-term trends for the sport are.
Well, if Syracuse is going to make its first run at the Sweet 16 since 2021, you need JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman on your roster to do it, and they are back. So onward to the portal to see how Syracuse continues to fill those holes. We'll have continuing coverage here on Syracuse Sports, on syracuse.com, and, of course, on our Syracuse Sports Insider text line. This is the best time to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. When news like this breaks, you get it first. You get analysis. You get spring football updates. Chris, Javon, Edmonds, and I have been sending you videos and observations from Syracuse football spring practice, which is well underway. We'll continue to do that through spring practice. The questions that you want us to ask Syracuse players and coaches, just send them along. You just want to shoot the breeze, talk SU Sports. That's what we're there for on the Syracuse Sports Insider text line. It's just $3.99 a month to join. You can try it free for 2 weeks, and the info is there on your screen or in the show notes if you're watching or listening later on here. So we would love for you to join our growing community of Syracuse Sports Insiders, and there is no better time with everything going on. Throw lacrosse in there to keep up to date and to talk SU Sports with us. For now, for Chris Carlson, I'm Brent Axe. It's been a live edition of Syracuse Sports with JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman back in the fold. We'll talk to you next time, guys.